Welcome to Flying for Flavor. This is episode 35 already. I am almost alone. I was going to be alone today, and I was going to talk about reducing food waste in my kitchen and all kinds of tips. And I thought, as usual, I don't like talking by myself. So I invited my friend Victoria Armit. She is the food rescue coordinator for the Sudbury region, as well as for Better Beginnings, Better Futures here in Sudbury. And welcome, Victoria.
Thanks very much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I thought since we just spent a whole day together at the Food Rescue Symposium, and it's launched not that long ago, that you'd be the best person to answer some of the questions that maybe some of our listeners have about what food rescue is, what they do, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so as the Flying for Flavor tradition, I will be starting off by letting you know what we're drinking. So today, actually, I want to introduce you to a Semillon, which is a fairly well-known grape in France, but it's also grown quite a bit in the Australia region. And one of my favorite regions in Australia is Hunter Valley, which is just north of Sydney, actually. So it's probably an hour and a half, 2 hours north. And there's very few from Hunter Valley that you can usually find in the LCBO, and this is one of the easy ones to find in most locations. So this is a 2015 Semillon. It's going to be a little bit bigger than some of the other white wines that you might be used to, but because of the heat in Australia, if you like an Australian Chardonnay or if you like any of the other Australian whites, then this might be something for you to try. I'll have the show notes. In the show notes, I'll have the listing for this wine for you as well, in case you want to drink along this weekend when you're listening all about reducing food waste. Doesn't quite tie in, but we got to have our wine rec, right? So, Victoria, let's just give a little bit of an introduction to maybe who you are, what you are trying to accomplish here in Sudbury, because you're kind of like the sole champion for food rescue right now here in Sudbury. So maybe tell us a little bit about it and what your role is.
Sure. So foodrescue.ca is a new online platform that will help connect businesses with agencies and nonprofit organizations within their communities that run food-related programs. So that in the event that a food business has a surplus that they're no longer able to use or sell, they can redirect that food to a local program that can direct it towards their clients and their meal programs and so on, instead of having to throw it away. It's a brand new initiative, and it's part of a provincial pilot project. So Sudbury is one of 4 communities that is testing out the system at this point, or soon to be testing out the system. And so Sudbury, along with Kingston, Niagara Region, and Toronto, are excited to get things going. And you'd mentioned earlier that I'm with Better Beginnings, Better Futures as well. And so that's one of the local social service agencies that will be rescuing food through foodrescue.ca. But they're also the local organization that is kind of leading the pilot phase of this project in Sudbury.
Well, I'm glad to see that somebody's been kind of spearheading something like this. I mean, I've always kind of followed the success of Second Harvest down in Toronto, and I've always been I'm a bit of a nitpicker when it comes to not wasting food. I do it in my own house, I do it in my cooking classes, I do it when I'm out. I'm a big fan of leftovers. and it's always kind of bothered me, especially when I was working full-time in the industry in my catering business, how it wasn't always convenient and easy to be able to find someone to take the food when I needed it, whether it was like the raw ingredients, whether it was, an overbuy, whether it was sometimes at the end of the night from a large order, there might be a client that was there on the premises and said, we don't want the leftovers, can you deliver this somewhere? So not always having all that access to be able to bring it someplace really always bothered me. I mean, my staff always tried to help eat it. I had a bunch of starving students working for me at the time.
The perks, eh?
The perks, exactly. However, there were a few times where I found like I was forcing myself to take things home and put it in my own freezer, just because I could not see myself throwing it out. Yep. And my poor family, they think they ate the same meals. I don't know how often when you have it left over. So I really see a need for it, and I'm kind of glad that Sudbury was chosen to be one of the first ones.
I'm hearing a lot about how do we use it, what do we do, what is it? So let me start off by giving you just a little bit of synopsis of what we want to do. We want to build a platform that enables donors and agencies, not-for-profits, community groups to connect. Because what we find is when communities are able to connect all together, we lose the we lose the me, we get the us, as I said before. That's what we are trying to produce, and that is what our goal is with this platform. We want to rescue food. We don't want to see stuff go in landfills. We want to enable it to be used and to feed somebody in need, and not just be something that is forgotten about. It's far too easy nowadays to, when you have extra, to get rid of it. It's cheap to throw things out. We all know that, and we all see it every day. But what if there was an alternative that didn't cost money, that made it simple, that enabled people not to throw something away, but to see it get used in the community? So that is where foodrescue.ca is coming to play. It's an online platform that matches both not-for-profits with donors. Donor says they have something, not-for-profit says we want something. Let's figure that out. We want to be the platform and enable that across both sides. And one of the key features of this is we don't want money. We want money from big people. We don't want money from you. This is all about enabling the communities that are happening. So let's quickly jump into this. So foodrescue.ca, it's up and running today. There are a few pieces that we're just finishing off and turning on, and we'll be talking about some of that. But there are two sides to foodrescue.ca. There's the donor side and the agency side. So when you come to Food Rescue, we ask you who you are, how you want to register. You want to donate food, you want to rescue food.
Can you register under both?
So the question was, can you register as both? We're going to get into that because a not-for-profit is instantly both. An agency is instantly both because they want to rescue food, and then let's say they rescued 100 pounds of food, they've got too much, there's a way for them to reissue that back into the community for others to use it.
I happened to notice when I was browsing around on the website that there's going to be an in-home section. So for those of you who aren't listening or who are not part of the food service or hospitality industries, there is going to be a section on this website that I think they're developing with other resources that are going to help anyone try to reduce food waste in their community or in their own home, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the focus right now is really on getting this tool up and running and getting the food exchanges happening between businesses and agencies. But if you look at the statistics, the lion's share of food waste is happening in our own homes. So we're wanting to provide some resources that can help people think a little bit more creatively about how they can be putting things to good use at home or avoiding creating so much waste to begin with. So that should be online once the food exchanges are taking place, like I said. So there's another couple of weeks probably before we'll be able to announce that businesses can actually start posting notifications to foodrescue.ca. Mm-hmm. And I guess I should explain a little bit about how the tool will actually work.
Sure.
Because like when you were explaining that it's if you have a surplus, especially if you're not a business that regularly is in that position, like retailers are more frequently perhaps. But if you're a food service business that maybe on an event by event basis might have some surplus, you don't necessarily know what to do with it or where to go, or aren't really familiar with what programs in the community might be able to use that. So the way the system is going to work is you'll be able to post a notification about the types of food that you have available. And that can be perishable, non-perishable, or even prepared foods. Mm-hmm. When that notification is posted, foodrescue.ca automatically sends an email to, or a text message even, to a local social service representative who can make a decision whether or not they would be able to come and retrieve that food and make use of it within the necessary time frame.
Yeah, because I think I remember there's going to be clips throughout this episode where Elliot from foodrescue.ca was actually walking through the software or the platform at the symposium that we were at. And one of the things that I really liked about is that as soon as you even click on, as a nonprofit agency, as soon as you click on a food donation that is listed there, once you click it, it's gone. It's basically accounted for. And it's one of those things that, you don't have to worry about, two or three people basically bidding or fighting over certain things. They kind of have all of the detail there exactly of what they're getting down to specifics. What's perishable, if it's frozen, refrigerated, pre-frozen. There's a lot of information there that'll probably make things a lot easier for both sides, actually.
Yeah, and the system is designed as well to sort of match the needs of the agency or the capability as far as storage and transportation and so on with what's available, so that as much as possible, agencies will be notified about things that they actually have previously identified that they could use.
So for those who are working in the food service industry or who are restaurant owners or retailers that have food that they might be looking at donating, is the platform up and ready to be used right now?
So it is taking registrations.
Okay.
So that really is the first step to participating, and since we're at this stage, there's really no reason to delay.
That's right.
So both agencies and businesses are able to register. Agencies need to go through a bit of an approval process. They need to demonstrate that they have a certified or a health inspected kitchen space.
Of course.
And depending on what kinds of food they're able to rescue, a certified food handler needs to be involved in any food preparation of the rescued food. But once we're able to check off some of those requirements, then agencies are approved to participate. And likewise on the food business side, they also need to have the necessary health inspections and so on in order to participate.
Obviously. Well, that's going to go to my next question, because as much as there might be people who are having special events like weddings or other social events, they can't necessarily just sign on this thing and register, because you don't necessarily know where that's coming. And this is meant for public donations from a business that has a certified kitchen, food handler on premises, as opposed to just, someone's grandma made too much lasagna, as an example.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that that's clarified, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are always looking to donate food. So it's more of a tracking thing about where it comes from, how it was prepared, how it was stored. Everyone just needs to make sure to tick all those boxes, I guess. I think it might be a good idea. I wasn't planning on it, but I think I'm going to add the link to the food handler certification at the Sudbury Public Health Unit. I think they changed their name recently.
Yeah, I think it's Public Health Sudbury and Districts now. But
Okay,
anyways.
something like that. Yes, as opposed to SDHU, which I learned for so long.
Yeah.
But there's a link I'll put directly in there, so that if anyone is working in any kind of a nonprofit organization and you think you might be wanting to participate, but you don't have a food handler certificate, or you have one that's been expired and you want to renew, I'll have the link on there and you'll be able to go, because you can actually do this in a one day on a Saturday. So it's very simple. It'll just teach you the rules about storage, preparation, internal temperatures, all that kind of fun stuff, actually. Now, the only other thing I wanted to talk about, just because I thought it was kind of cool, like if there's a business that has certain charities that they really want to support as to prioritize, is there a way for them to kind of put a favorites list of somehow? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so especially, I'm not sure about especially, but in Sudbury at least, there are certainly relationships that have been established already between businesses that are already connecting with agencies to donate some of their surplus food. And we want to make sure that Food Rescue is really supporting and enhancing what's already going on, instead of trying to replicate things unnecessarily. So businesses are able to choose a specific agency if they wish to receive a notice about what they have available instead of it going out to the whole pool of potential recipient organizations that might be interested in picking it up. And as we get going, as I mentioned, it's a pilot project, but as we get going, I think that we'll start to see some patterns develop and some relationships develop because of food rescue as well, between local agencies and businesses within their communities. The way that it's kind of set up is it's really helps with the proximity, I guess. It helps connect neighbors and sort of build community at the local level. So
I think someone on the symposium, I don't know if it was Terry or someone, that called it a dating app for food rescue.
Yeah,
I thought that was such a cute analogy because that's kind of what I was trying to envisioning was this matchmaking service of some sort. So who knows? It could be dating, but I can see fundraising events. In their future, right? Especially if they create that relationship on an ongoing basis, that they can kind of support one another.
Yeah,
right?
We'll see where it goes for sure.
So when you register, there's quite, for both agencies and donors, there's a lot of information we ask. We're asking this information because part of what we're doing in this framework right now is part of this is a pilot. We're discovering all the rules and regulations around this. A lot of this hasn't been done in Canada before. So how do we enable it? How do we do it? What are the different rules in communities? So we ask a lot of information to gather from you about what you're doing with the food, how you're doing it, so that we can go back and report to all of our stakeholders to tell how it's being used. From a not-for-profit side, you have to be health inspected, you have to agree to some of our terms and conditions about non-solicitation, rules about redistribution. These are things that are coming to us from the government, from the framework, so that you are protected, you are safe. This is not, we are doing this not to spite you, not to do anything about that. It's about ensuring that you, as an organization, are protected, your volunteers are protected, and that you're maintaining what is required from the Good Food Act. So, we ask that you register. We ask that you tell us a bit about yourself, give us your email address, give us your phone number. One of the neat technology pieces that we're doing in our system is, as I said, we are about enabling. So when we get down to how we match everything back and forth, we're going with a model of we don't care who you are, what technology you use, we want to enable it. So we have SMS, we have email, we have on-screen notifications, everything that you need to be able to use the system. Once you register as a donor, you've got wonderful things you can do. Now, one of the key things that we want to produce in this is we want to enable information. So we have the background grayed out right now because we're still working on that piece and we want to deliver it once we know what people want. This is your dashboard. This shows you your key metrics of information. What have you rescued? How much have you rescued? What greenhouse gases have you offset? How many pounds of food have you donated or rescued? And the dollar value of that impact, and also how many people it equates to. So one of the things Second Harvest has is it has a plethora of information over time that's enabling us to draw on our history, to draw on other research being done in the marketplace, and do all these calculations for you. So as you're using our system from both the donor side and the agency side, we're recording for you everything you do. How many pounds have you rescued? How many pounds have you donated? And what does that equal to the supply chain? What does that equal to the environment? At the end of the year, you want to see your impact. At the end of 6 months, you want to see your impact. You're able to come in, grab the information, see the dashboards, and are presented with how have you helped and how have you donated into the community. It's a real key piece of this for us is the impact that you're having both on the donor and agency side. That's something that's critical for us to deliver.
Because we are talking about food waste and food rescue, I always have tips in mind. Do you have any personal tips for what you use to reduce food waste, either at home or at Better Beginnings?
Yeah, well, at home, I'm a big believer in, if your fridge is full, then say no to the fantastic sale on
like
bananas
I did today
or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And just making sure that you're always turning over your fridge and looking in the back and not forgetting about things. And like you said before, with using leftovers, I personally, I'm a big fan of leftovers. But yeah, like as far as tips to reduce food waste and that sort of thing within businesses, I think that it's interesting because businesses really have a vested interest in making sure that that is minimized from the get-go, because really at the end of the day it represents profit loss. So like reviewing menus and inventories for, you know, what's popular and what's less popular and what people are sort of sending back to the kitchen and things like that. Just learning from those experiences and making changes that reflect those learnings. I think it boils down to kind of common sense. But people who are in the food industry, I think, are in a unique position to really share the knowledge about the impact of food waste from an environmental perspective, and what the opportunity is with a tool like food waste to actually to reduce that environmental impact and also benefit the local community as well.
And especially if you work in a restaurant, there's nothing more than a manager or owner wants to hear are tips on how to save money, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
essentially reducing food waste or being able to utilize, parts or leftover ingredients is just a way for them to actually help their bottom line. A lot of people don't think about it that way, so that it helps save money as well. Because I think about my own kitchen would be very similar, even to how a restaurant kitchen would function, where you have particular menus set. You need certain ingredients for those menu items. You take inventory of what you currently have in stock. You only order or purchase what you need. And then when you get them in, then you basically divide up what you need for this particular period of time, and then you either try to store or freeze the rest. And I actually posted a little picture on Facebook this morning, basically talking about the first in, first out system. And when you were talking about, checking through your fridge and making sure things don't get lost in the back, I have to admit, I can tease him because he's not here. My husband's notorious for buying more ingredients of something we already have in the fridge. So but it's only because he goes grocery shopping by himself. So if he comes home with, more of certain kind of, like hummus as an example, I will always tease him. I'll just say, you didn't even look in the fridge, or text me to check the fridge first before you go buy 2 or 3 more new containers, right?
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
then it's a matter of he starts feeling like he has to be forced to eat all this hummus and certain things, and that happens to be one of those things that does not freeze the best.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity for using a freezer as a big use for that. I live for my freezer. I don't just have the freezer that's attached to my fridge in the main part of my house. I also have a full-size upright freezer. I actually have 2 of them in my working kitchen from my old catering business that I did not get rid of. And it's been one of those things that I've learned over the years, and maybe it's because of the catering thing, that I freeze my ingredients. So if I'm making a lasagna as an example, and you have to cook all different parts, as opposed to making up 3 times the size of lasagna that I need, I will cook the individual parts and I will store and freeze those individually, because this way the ground beef that I'm not using for the lasagna, at least it can be used for something else, right? And then you can date it and put it on the container and throw that in the freezer. Same thing with any of the other, like the shredded cheese that you're using that's not finished. So there's all these components, and the more you can separate things, the easier it is to pull things together that may not originally started together to create a new recipe.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons that people avoid leftovers, is only because they don't want to eat something reheated
Lasagna
that they
for
just
a week.
just had, right? But if you could take some of those parts and either make a really hearty soup out of it, or make some wraps or quesadillas by adding in some Mexican flavors. Like, there's just a lot of ways you can manipulate it. And that would be a little shout out for anyone who's always looking for more recipes. I have about 100 on my website right now. And I'm going to start probably within this next week, that every time during one of my classes that I mention having to do with saving food somehow, that I will either take a photo, video, or something, and I will post it on the Flying for Flavor Facebook page, so that you have no excuse by the end of the week that you should be able to incorporate more opportunities to talk with your family about maybe saving food a little bit more often.
Yeah.
And then once you get in the habit, once you start going to work, especially if you are in the hospitality industry, you can take some of these new habits to work. And the more people get in the habit, I think, of doing these things, the better off everybody will be.
Yeah, for sure.
So once you're in, you want to donate. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make it as simple as possible. From a donor side, there's two types of donations. There's a one-time donation and a recurring donation. A one-time donation is when a donor says, I have excess food today. Here it is, now you put it out to the community, who wants it? A recurring donation is when a donor has a relationship with a specific agency and says, you know what, why don't you come every Friday? Why don't you come once a month? And I'm going to store the food for you, and I want to make a relationship with you so that I know where it's going and I know who it's helping. And this is part of our community building. The bonus for the donor of a recurring donation is they don't have to put down what they're donating. Because it's recurring, you just come get whatever's available, and we ask the agency to come in afterwards and record what they received. Whereas a one-time donation, because it's not recurring, because it can go out to the community, we're asking the donor to tell us as much as possible about the donation so that we know what's in it, so that we can match it better with agencies.
So I'm looking at the food donor application guide, and there is a section that says prepared food. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that. So I work for a restaurant, and I know, let's say, for instance, we make 7 extra pizzas by accident. Is there like a time frame where we can say, hey, come pick this up within 2 hours before it gets to the danger zone or something like that?
There is, yes. You can put down, you gotta come today, you gotta come between these hours. But what we really want to do, and Ron, just jump on this a little bit, we want you to get it cold. We want you to get it into the freezer. It prolongs its life indefinitely, and it really allows you to hold it. Now, in your case, when you've got that sort of item that might go bad quickly, that's where we want to help you make a connection locally. Is there an agency nearby you that has people available to get to you quickly, to get that food or to help you distribute it? And that's where Victoria can come to play and say, I've got this little agency nearby you that's got somebody around that when you post it, just pick them and they'll come running over, they're close by. But we do have guidelines in there about how to get a product so that it can be rescued at a later date. And that's all of this is we find that if it's time of, it's challenging, but if there's a window, you can get it rescued.
And I did mention earlier, too, that prepared foods are going to be able to be exchanged through Food Rescue. And when you're talking about freezing, that's really the best practice that we're promoting. So catering business that has trays, for example, that weren't actually put out, instead of
Me storing it in my freezer for 2 months?
Yeah. Then that could go in the freezer and be posted on foodrescue.ca so that an organization could come and retrieve it and take it to a meal program or what have you. So,
And I think it's actually not just better, safer food practice by freezing that, but it's also basically going to allow more flexibility in pickup times for arranging for
sure.
pickup afterwards.
Yeah.
So a lot of smart tips on there. So is there anything else that you would like to let our listeners know about the new platform, what they can look forward to coming in the future, and maybe one little send off of one last little tip to reduce food waste?
well, check out foodrescue.ca. And the registration form and so on is all certainly there for you to take a look through, and it's pretty straightforward. We're looking at, like I said earlier, at being ready to actually start the food exchanges, and businesses will be able to start posting notifications in the next couple of weeks. So now is the time to get your ducks in the row to be ready for the official launch of that functionality. And then come June, we'll actually be expanding the program so that it is a province-wide pilot. So if you're not located in one of those pilot communities, Kingston, Sudbury, or Toronto or Niagara region, then you're still able to register at this point. And certainly you can contact us. There's a contact us function on the website where you can reach out to us if you have questions and would like more information about that province-wide rollout as well.
Sounds perfect. So basically, her tip is register now, regardless of where you're listening from.
Yeah.
As long as you're from Ontario, yes, go ahead.
that.
Register now. So at least that you're all signed up, and then once your community is ready to go, at least you'll be one of the first in line. So I'm going to have the link to not only the foodrescue.ca website on the website, of course. I'm also in the show notes going to include, I audio taped most of the symposium presentation. So I've actually taken out the full, almost unedited clip with a lot of the local nonprofits that were there getting to present as well, and talking about why rescuing food is so important to their agency, which I think will be interesting for people to listen to see how they fit in this whole new system. And then I'm going to list, of course, the food handlers as well, and then any other little tips that I can think of between now and Saturday morning, I'll include by them as well.
Yeah, and there is an upcoming symposium in Niagara as well.
Oh, for all my wine friends.
Yeah, so we're all in each community is sort of having our own event to connect local businesses and or potential donors and potential recipient organizations. And so the one in Niagara region is coming up in the next couple of weeks. The date is off the top of my head escaping me.
That's okay. You can send it to me, and I will also include that in the show notes.
Sounds
And
good.
then I'll send a notice out on all the social media channels, all of them that I have, just for anyone who's in the Niagara region that may have contacts who may want to attend that symposium. It's a really great full-day discussion on how to partner up with both sides on the rescuer side and the donor side, so that everybody wins in the long run. So in closing, again, the links will all be in the show notes, and of course the show notes are going to be available at stephaniepichet.ca/flavor35. And yes, we are in Canadian, so we spelled flavor with FLAVOUR. Next week, we are talking California wine and how to bring it home. Yes, that means in the suitcase. I am the master at packing wine, and we're going to teach you how to do it. And just by timing wise, next week I'll be attending the California Wine Show in Ottawa. There are several locations and dates throughout Canada. This is the time of the year where the California wine producers actually travel across Canada and showcase events. I will have some brief interviews with certain producers, some of the sales reps, and of course just California wine fans. And then of course, hopefully the entire Flavor crew will be back here because I'm sure they're going to want to sip everything that I'm bringing. That's just the way it works around here. So make sure that you subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcast, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, and of course, our built-in player is always available at flyingforflavor.ca. Until next week, happy cooking, reduce food waste, and cheers.